welcome, Donna Deegan.
What is everyone's favorite deadly sin?
Well, take a guess. I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, all right. I'll pick my own.
The mind reels. um, since I last saw you, you ran a marathon or a half
marathon? Yeah, I ran a half marathon. I haven't been able to have time to train for the full over the last couple of years, but the half was enough.
Yeah. Well, you've also been pretty busy running the city.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's
so
that.
What's new?
Gosh, so much is new. You know, we've really launched heavily into this new literacy program, which we're very excited about. We had set a goal for 300,000 reading minutes for folks to log on to this Beanstack app and log their hours. We're already over 100,000 minutes. So we're going to have to adjust that up pretty quickly. You know, it's funny because we had initially talked about making it 1 million minutes and thought, let's set a goal that might be more realistic. Well, we're going to have to up that goal because we're less than a month in and we're already over 100,000 minutes. And this Saturday, we're actually doing another event at the main library. It's going to be so fun from 1 to 2, where we're going to have a children's author who wrote a book about her husband, Mike, the friendly firefighter, who unfortunately passed. But the firefighters are going to be there. She's going to read her book, which is a fantastic, beautiful children's book. There's going to be a fire truck for kids to climb on and firefighters to take pictures with and things. But the whole idea of continuing to do these events throughout the year is to just shine a light on how much fun reading is and how much it can bring into our lives. And so far, people seem to be really grabbing onto that. So I'm very excited about that. Something that I think that you might be very interested in is we're launching a new transparency dashboard at City Hall, which will be up in about a week, where we'll have various departments. We'll start with things like 630 City and Public Works and some of the more forward-facing that people might want to, permitting, where people can see how the progress is going, how our project's coming along. Sort of keep us honest in terms of where we are on things, and people can sort of track that in real time. So these are things that we talked about during the campaign that we really wanted to make sure that we did to create a scenario where people had an opportunity to really play a more active role in their government. So, and then I think the other big exciting thing today is that we're going to be reopening Friendship Fountain, which
my gosh,
I'm so excited about that.
Long time coming.
$8 million, at least in this first phase of the park. But the fountain's going to have synchronized music, and the technology is so much improved. It's just it's such a gateway to Jacksonville and to downtown that I think that the park is going to be absolutely amazing.
Very Instagrammable these days. I saw a little
100%.
sneak peek, and it's kind of got this like Bellagio feel to it. With
It does.
Yeah.
Because you'll have the music in sync with the lights and the water and all that. So, but of course, we're much better here than the Bellagio.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. We got a couple of calls I want to get to. Mark on the west side. Good morning. Welcome to First Coast Connect.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
I've been hearing some things over the last couple of months with the NFL, and I don't know where this is going exactly, but the NFL apparently is going to merge with ESPN. And over the last few months, some of the playoff games that used to be, free for all to see have been, you had to go to streaming services. And apparently, from what I hear, the NFL is going to, in the next few years, make all games on some sort of pay-per-view basis, that we won't be able to see them on free live TV. And I don't think it's right for us to spend our taxpayer money if they're only going to use our stadium totally for profit. It'll only be, you can only get the games on a streaming service, or you attend the games at the stadium. And I don't think that's right for us to pay for that.
Well, let me just say, first of all, thanks for the call. But let me just say, first of all, I have not heard that. And I would be extraordinarily surprised if the television networks were cut out of NFL coverage. That would surprise me greatly. I'm not saying there won't be some things that are on streaming services, but it would very much surprise me if television contracts went away as far as the NFL is concerned. That said, he may know more than I do on that front. I have not heard that, and that's not anything that I've heard from the NFL in terms of any of the contract talks that we've had. So certainly that wouldn't sound very appealing to me either. As far as the stadium goes here in Jacksonville, there are so many reasons beyond just economic development that I think that's going to be an important piece for our city. if we want to keep our NFL team, and I believe that we do, and I believe most citizens in this city, if you talk to them, even the ones that don't really want to spend public money there, really want to keep the team. And the NFL has made it abundantly clear that without certain upgrades and without certain commitments from cities, they're just not going to do that. So we are, as I've said from the beginning, going to create the very best deal that we can for Jacksonville, for our taxpayers, for our citizens, and create as much economic development out of that as we possibly can. One of the things that I have been most involved in, we've got, as you know, a professional negotiating team that's used to negotiating with the NFL, working out the financial details. But as far as the things that I'm spending most of my time on personally is looking at varying ways that we can take that community economic development piece, the community empowerment piece, that is going to be a really significant part of the contract. And make sure that we're creating some economic empowerment for those communities around the stadium.
There was an interesting proposal that's been discussed this week in the news about a way to finance stadium improvements, which I thought was unique, this possibility that it could be possibly that the pension fund, the city's own pension fund, could be that pool of money to draw from.
Yeah, it would basically be keeping it all in the family, right? And then, of course, you'd have to pay the pension fund back at the rate at which they would target their investments. So I don't know that that's something that will actually happen. That is an idea that Mike Weinstein floated to me and said that this is just one of the many options that I'm looking at. And it's intriguing because it really is. I told him at the very beginning, Mike, think out of the box. This is going to be a big ticket item regardless of what the price tag is, right? Because it's just a lot of money regardless of any way you look at it. And I said, come up with creative ways in which this would allow us to do this with the resources that we have. And I think it's just one of the things he's looking at.
We're talking to Mayor Donna Deegan. We're taking your calls at 904-549-2937 and your emails at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Jim in Riverside, good morning. Welcome to First Coast Connect.
Yes, thank you. Mayor Deegan, so you were elected to do things, and it seems once again that the council has caught the do-nothing virus from their counterparts in Congress. I see them trying to thwart you from bringing in private money that you want to do things, and also federal and state grant money that you want to do things, basically money that doesn't come from them. And so I would ask, how can you combat that to get some things done, and how can we help?
Well, listen, I appreciate the comments. I think that most of the folks on the city council really want to get things done. I think there are a lot of political pressures that surround the fact that, frankly, we have divided government now. You have a Democratic mayor with a Republican majority council, and I think they get a lot of pressure to, I'll say, create distractions. And I do think there are a handful of them that do make that a priority. I think the great majority of the people on the council really do want to move forward and make sure they are doing everything that they can to move this city forward. As far as that is concerned, look, I have made it abundantly clear that I don't appreciate efforts to do anything that's going to diminish our balance of authority here in the city. We have a strong mayor form of government, and this council seems, at least in part, intent on taking one-time issues and turning them into reasons to take authority away from the mayor's office. I think that's unfortunate, but let me just say this. I will not be deterred from my absolute mission, which is to get things done for the people of this city. I outlined some of those things this morning. The $26 million, which I'm proud to say that council approved unanimously to create some of our initiatives, is getting to be getting in full swing right now, where we're funding all of those different initiatives, which I know are also initiatives that are important to many on the council. So I look forward to doing all that. The distractions aside, I'm going to keep focused on what I need to do. And if there are certain people on the council that want to continue to create issues for political expediency, then they'll have to do that. But I am going to continue to be focused on the agenda moving this city forward and doing everything I can for the people of Jacksonville. That's why I'm here. I've said this before, and I don't have any political aspirations beyond the office of mayor. That frees me to just do what I think is the right thing. I'm not always going to get it right. I'm going to try to get it right. But the bottom line is a lot of these folks that are on the council are taking some cues from frankly, a local GOP leadership that believes the divisiveness works for them. I campaigned on ending that divisiveness, on creating a new culture in City Hall, and I believe that we're starting to see some of the fruits of that. But anybody who thought that culture that basically, believes in that toxic sort of combative, divisive, political nature is not going to go away overnight, and it probably won't go away at all. But the more that you asked what you can do, the more you can be involved in your city government, the more you can show up to speak your mind, the more you can vote. Those are ways in which you can use your voice to make sure that people in this city are heard, and that we create more of a unifying presence here as opposed to one of division.
We've got a comment in that vein from Gregory on X. He says the city council has shown over the last several months that they are determined that it is they, not she, who run this town. How will the mayor be able to work with the council to advance her goals to move Jacksonville to a better place? We also have Tom on the west side who has a similar comment, I believe. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning to you both. Yes, my question was if the mayor thought that 2446 that they just passed that limits her authority is consistent with the city charter. I think there may be problems because, as you mentioned, the city was established with a strong mayor. Also, a quick answer to Mark's question. The NFL says it's committed to on-air broadcast.
Okay, great. In terms of working with council, look, and I've said this too, and anybody at any level of government will tell you this. Politics or that necessity for some people to say certain things publicly is my least favorite part of the job. I don't love it, but I know that it's part of the political landscape. But that does not mean that I cannot work well with members of city council. As I've said, most of them really want to move this city forward, and a lot of our goals are aligned.
The 2446 that he's referencing, that's the veto power bill that was approved this week. Is that what he's talking about?
I'm not sure which one that is. Maybe he could. There's so many that were passed this week. I'm not sure which one he's talking about. There was one on single source contracts. There was another one that gave more power to the sheriff in terms of being able to weigh in on settlements.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another one that limited my ability to take in private money to do certain projects like monuments and I've said repeatedly that that's the only monument I plan to remove. But that's why I said so much of this is simply a solution in search of a problem, but it provides fodder for political discussion. But I think when we get behind closed doors and we're really discussing moving the city forward, most of those council people really want to do that. We're not always going to agree on how best to do that, but I think we've worked well together. I think the $26 million that we have put into our initiatives is really a good example of that. And so I think don't take everything that you see that is said publicly and assume that is how negotiations or other commentary goes on privately. We will continue to work together to move the city forward. And occasionally we're going to have these very, unfortunately, high-profile situations that distract us from the main goal, which is to get things done for the people of the city.
Do you have a better relationship with some of the city council members who've been contentious, particularly on these issues behind the scenes, than you do as it would appear to the public?
Yeah, I do.
How about with TK? I mean, how is your relationship with the sheriff? Are you able to kind of pierce the political veil there when you're talking to him? Because it does seem like it's a very political interaction these days.
Well, look, I have said repeatedly that I have had a good relationship with TK since I have been in office. We've had very good conversation. Again, we don't always agree on everything, but where we do, we've worked together. We created a public service announcement on trying to educate people on how to store their guns safely so that they're not used in crimes or stolen or any of the number of horrible things that can happen when people have a gun taken from their possession. So I work with the sheriff pretty well. And I think, unfortunately, again, I think that a lot of folks try to create sort of a narrative there that doesn't really exist. In terms of this current bill that just passed City Council, my main concern on that bill, I 100% agree with the sheriff that he needs to be notified when these things come up. And from what I understand, both his officers and his office are notified.
And in this case, we're notified. But I was hopeful we could work on a structure there that wouldn't require putting into place an ordinance that my concern is, after talking to our CFO and after listening to the general counsel, that may end up costing us a lot of additional dollars and possibly problems in insurance. Because it's really no mayor or anyone else in city government really spends any time on those things beyond the professionals that are there to determine risk, and they also work with the officers and everything else. My concern is that, and then obviously I'm concerned about exposure for the officers themselves if these cases don't get solved. But I'm sure the sheriff is concerned about that as well. I spoke with the council president about the bill. He was very committed to making this go. And but he did tell me, he said, look, if any of these things materialize, because they're frankly not convinced they will. He said, if any of these things... You mean if there was a veto, if someone who was a constitutional officer objected to a proposed settlement? Is that what you mean?
No. What I'm saying is that council is obviously not convinced that any of these financial concerns are real. But the council president did say to me that if in fact those things materialize, then he's willing to go back and revisit this. Right now, they want to give the sheriff this opportunity with a veto from the council president, and that's what the supermajority of the council said.
So if our insurance premiums as a city go up, he'd be willing to revisit it.
I think any number of things. If you end up looking at millions in legal fees, in additional legal fees, if you end up looking at an insurance issue, if you end up with officers who are in a precarious
having to pay out of pocket,
position,
basically,
right? So I think all of those things. Again, I'm not sure this legislation was necessary, but it is where we are.
We've got a call. Stanley on the north side. Good morning, Stanley.
Good morning, ladies. I am so impressed with the mayor. I support the mayor.
Thank you.
That doesn't mean I agree with everything, but when it comes to 90% of things she does, I support her. She's on the right track. I will be working with the mayor when it comes to the urban core. 54 years of disenfranchisement. But I will be working because she's the right kind of mayor. Now, I want members of city council, a segment of the city council, to get out her way. And I'm talking about those mayor Republicans. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley.
Thanks, Stanley.
We're talking to Mayor Donna Deegan, and we're taking your calls and emails. We have a comment from Mike on X. He says, when will the mayor start community-wide meetings to discuss the comprehensive removal of all monuments, markers, symbols, and names that glorify the Confederacy, racism, discrimination, segregation, and all forms of oppression, as proposed by the Northside Coalition and the Civic Council?
Yeah, I can tell you that at least in terms of Springfield Park, we are in the process of trying to work on developing charrettes to talk to those issues, of what we want to do with the park, of what may become of the statues. That's where we're focused right now. There may be a larger discussion that occurs in conjunction with that. But I think to suggest to you that I have a timetable for those in terms of anything immediately within the next weeks, I don't have that yet. I think that perhaps this past month needs to settle a bit. We're still waiting to see the eventual. It sounds like the legislature in Florida is not going to deal with this issue, but nothing's ever over till it's over. So once we see how that whole landscape settles out, then I'm hopeful that we can do that in the spring.
You know, you mentioned the bill that was in the legislature that was proposed by our own Dean Black. He's a Jacksonville Republican. would have penalized mayors like yourself for removing Confederate monuments, would have required some of them to be put back. And it appears now that that those bills might be dead, largely because the people who were supporting it were openly racist. What is your sense of how that the people who support the Confederacy, who are self-avowed white supremacists, were supporting this bill? Does that surprise you? And the fact that their association might actually derail the bill?
Look, whatever derails that bill, in fact, it is derailed, I think is a good thing. Obviously, I have said so many times that we need to stop litigating the Civil War. We need to move forward, and we cannot have, when I talk about unity all the time, Ann, that is not, you can't have unity in absence of seeing everyone's humanity. Unity doesn't mean acquiescence to injustice. You have to have unity that is brought about by seeing everybody and bringing everybody in. That said, it is very, very clear when you look at some of these comments where racism plays in this issue. It is a part of this issue in a big way, and I think that to see that recognized is a positive thing. But like I said, in Tallahassee, having covered Tallahassee for many, many years, nothing's done until the hanky drops. So I'm watching along with everybody else.
I want to talk a little bit about downtown because you mentioned the Friendship Fountain, which after a lot of delays got kickstarted, which is great. But also this fire that happened at the Doro, Rise Doro building was a huge setback in a way for that part of downtown. A lot of businesses around there waiting, for this apartment building that was just about to fill up with tenants.
It was. They were within a week of moving their first set of tenants in there. It's heartbreaking, honestly. I've said it before, but I'm grateful to hear that the developer does want to go back and restart. Now, I don't know how long that will take. I don't know how long the investigation and all of those things will take. But they have said they want to begin again. They would like to do more of a concrete and steel construction than to use wood, is what I've been told. That's going to be more expensive, obviously. But they have all kinds of incentives now for why that may be a good idea.
Yeah, it's really interesting that they're thinking about doing it. I mean, it would be way more expensive. Does it give you pause about other buildings that are essentially wood structures like that? I mean, there's so many. I think people were surprised at how flammable and quickly that building burned. I mean, obviously, a lot of the safety systems weren't in place.
Well, they weren't because the final inspections hadn't been done. Once the final inspections had been done on that sprinkler system, that would have been on. So that may have solved.
Does that suggest like any need for maybe a revision of how those sprinkler system, the timetable for things, the safety measures to be finalized, perhaps earlier? Yeah,
perhaps. But I think for me, until I have some decent idea of what happened here, it's hard to say. Mm-hmm. I think none of us knows what caused this fire or why it went up the way it did. Now, there were 30-mile-an-hour winds, that were blowing over the course of those 2 days, nonstop. So that certainly did not help. But look, if everybody had the resources to build concrete and steel construction, that's probably what they would do. But I don't think that means necessarily that using wood is a bad thing. I mean, obviously houses go up all over the city all the time, and they don't catch on fire every day. Something happened here. We don't know what happened yet, but certainly I think it's worth looking at those things and seeing if perhaps those mechanisms might have to go into place early, or at least discuss a change.
Can the city do anything to kind of sweeten the pot for this developer that has to kind of come in and start over again? Because it seems like a difficult, back foot posture to have to redo
it does
everything.
Seem like that. Look, we work with every developer that wants to do work in the city. The fact is that we, and this is something that people need to be aware of. The fact is that if you have anything that is going to be built in the city of Jacksonville that's over 6 stories high, we don't have a lot of the people here in this city that do that work. We don't have that workforce here in any sort of grand scale. So that adds about 20% to the cost of what a developer would have to pay to go up on a high-rise situation. Lower rise buildings are not quite as, obviously not quite as labor intensive or the same type of labor. And so we have an easier time with those. But every single developer that comes into the city, we try to work with, because at some point we want to get to that to that point where we have enough going up at once to where we get that basically that spontaneous combustion that just takes us to where everybody wants to be here.
Pun intended there.
Oh gosh, no, gosh, what a terrible goodness.
Sorry.
Could you please help me?
I
mean,
apologize.
that's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm sorry that I used that term. That did not help, did it? But what I'm saying is we want the key in the ignition in downtown, and that will happen when we have enough of these projects going up at once.
We've got a call. Dunn, give us your comments. Dunn, welcome to First Coast Connect. You there, Don?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Okay. I noticed the other day that some of the sheriff's officers were dressed in what looked like military uniforms instead of the normal blue uniforms. So I couldn't see any badges or anything. It was khaki clothes. And
We've got a terrible connection. We've got a bad connection, but where did you see that?
it was in Riverside. I was going into the fresh market at the time.
Okay.
But it made me feel like I was in a military state or something. It was, that's just very uncomfortable to see.
Thanks, Don. You familiar with that?
I am not. I'm afraid I haven't seen that, so I couldn't comment on it. I don't know.
Okay. Thanks for the call anyway. We are taking your calls. If you want to get in touch with the mayor, she's here at 904-549-2937. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. The story that has been getting a lot of attention in relation to JSO, especially on social media, is a video that appears to show a JSO officer slapping a young man that he's detained and handcuffed. I don't know if you've seen the video or if it concerns you, but there's also moving through Tallahassee a bill that would outlaw oversight boards, citizen oversight boards would make those illegal on the local level. I wonder if you have any thoughts about how the city is doing, how JSO is doing in terms of repairing or restoring its relationship with the community.
Well, I know that the sheriff has made transparency a big point of his administration. I know that he does a lot of walks around the community, which is another good way to connect with people in Jacksonville. As far as this particular instance goes, somebody sent me that video. I can't tell you that I've seen the whole thing, but I have said in the past that I think some sort of iteration of, it doesn't have to be a civilian review board, but some way in which community groups can have better communication with the sheriff's office in terms of these types of things, I think would be helpful. The sheriff believes that would be detrimental to his officers, and that's where he stands on that issue. And I don't know where the bill is in Tallahassee, but to me, anytime you can increase communication, the Supreme Court made it abundantly clear in Florida back in 2017 that any civilian oversight board has absolutely no legal authority over a sheriff's office. He is the duly elected sheriff. He gets to make the decisions. But to me, anything you can do to give people that ability to feel that they are communicating in a way that helps to protect them and the sheriff's office is a good thing to me. So I'd like for us to move some direction on that. I don't know where the bill is in Tallahassee, but for the moment, that doesn't seem to be something that the sheriff is interested in. I'm hopeful that it's just because we haven't come up with the format that is workable. But he does seem very interested in additional transparency, and so I hope that will expand to something that might resemble something like that.
I want to ask you, just because it's jury selection is starting today in the JEA corruption case against two former executives of the municipal authority. Is that something that you followed as it was developing? Is that something that you are going to be following closely in the next month as the trial occurs?
Well, certainly. I think we've all followed it. I mean, it was one of those things that sort of branded in your brain for that period of time, almost in a surreal way where you can't believe it actually happened. At least that's
or that it came so close to happening.
That's what I mean. I mean, it's just it's the whole thing sort of reads like a novel. But sure, I'm watching it. I have often wondered over the last several weeks if perhaps that's one of the reasons that there's so much additional conversation happening around other issues right now. That there are a lot of folks that would prefer that we not pay such close attention to that trial. But I think the people of Jacksonville certainly are interested in it, and we want to make sure that something like that never happens again in our city. So I will certainly be watching that.
If there is not a conviction, of course, they have a process to go through. They've pleaded innocent, or pleaded not guilty. But if they were to be acquitted, do you think that would be a big disappointment for people in the city? I mean, do you think that the city is intent upon having the two men charged in this case convicted for the corruption that they've been accused of?
I think the big thing is that people want to know what happened. I think that's the bottom line, is that I think people feel like there's still a lot of shadow around what happened with our public utility and who was involved in that. So whatever the outcome, I trust the criminal justice system to come out with whatever the right outcome is there. But I do think people are very interested in learning all the steps that happened in that process. And as you said, we came perilously close to losing our public utility, which some would argue is one of our greatest assets in this city.
The corruption component is one element of this, but how much of the responsibility for just the overall issue that got to this point do you put on the former mayor?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's one of the things that will probably be brought to light in a lot of these discussions. I really don't know. I know that certainly nobody in the former administration has been charged with anything. So I think I think at the very least there was certainly a strong interest in exploring privatization, which of course there's nothing wrong with that. But I think in terms of how far and how deep that went, that is something all of us have a very strong interest in wanting to know.
We've got a call. Bob in Atlantic Beach. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Well.
How are you?
I have a comment to make about how people view the city of Jacksonville. We don't view the entire city. We yell and scream about a particular issue. For example, I work with a nonprofit, Florida Youth Maritime Training. The city of Jacksonville supports us by renting us a piece of property for $1 a year. We're training about 60 young people a year who are making about $60,000, which is bringing in a fair amount of money to the city. But we don't focus on stuff like that. I don't want to focus on Florida Youth necessarily, but we should start to focus on everything, not just particular issues, because the way we measure the health of the city is by everything, not by one thing. Thank you.
Bob, I so agree with that. And this is one of the things that we really are trying to do. One of my big goals when I came into office was to increase our public-private partnerships and to shine a light on some of the great work that our local nonprofit community is doing. That's one of the reasons we talk so much about trying to bring more money into Jacksonville through federal grants and other things. We want to make sure that we are creating those relationships that will make our city successful. And he's right. There's so much good work going on. And I think that's you see this so much nationally, right? And my hope is that we can hold it off locally as much as possible to where people get so fatigued. And I think sometimes that's the game. People get so fatigued with the chaos of it all that they just want to disconnect. And I want to connect people to their government. I want to bring people into City Hall and make them feel like they are a part of it. And what Bob is talking about is exactly what we are trying to do, is to create a spotlight on programs like that and partnerships like that actually create great value for all of our citizens. And the rest of this, about a handful of people care about these political food fights. But they end up taking up so much oxygen in the room that people have a view of Jacksonville that just isn't Jacksonville.
So, I mean, you come from a media background. So when the media is focusing on those stories, I mean, you kind of know how a newsroom works.
I do.
And how that machine operates. How do you have a special skill as a mayor now to sort of work around that, work through that, combat the way that those that tunnel vision can develop on certain issues?
Look, I don't know if it's a skill as a mayor or a journalist or anything, or just my own personal conviction. I have a very different view of the world than a lot of people that come into jobs like this. I am very love and unity focused over fear and division focused. I've been that way for a long time. Maybe that comes from my nonprofit work. But when I say that, I don't mean for that to sound, dippy. It really is. It's a process of let's find the good and let's promote the good. When I have my gaggle with the press every couple of weeks, and basically that's one of the things that I said to them is, look, I think Jim Piggott was the one that asked me, do you see things differently from this seat now than you did when you were a journalist? And I said, no. And if you remember in the short time that you worked with me, I was always the one going into the newsroom saying, let's do the stuff that provides value to people. Why do we have to talk? It seems like we come into these meetings half the time trying to figure out how we're going to take our clothes off today to make sure that people pay attention to what we're saying. It is the trial of our times in journalism, because we need journalists now more than we have ever needed them. But because their resources are so cut and because it's 24/7, there is this absolute willingness sometimes to just go after whatever the quick, sexy thing is. And that doesn't do people the greatest service. So journalists are going to say what they want, and I told them I will defend to my death their right to do that. But at the end of the day, I would love to see us focus on those things that improve the lives of people in Jacksonville and not get caught up in the food fights so much.
Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan, thanks for joining us. We appreciate this talk every month, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thanks, Ann. Me too.
All right.